Has there ever been something that seemed so simple and yet so profoundly powerful when you heard it, you couldn't believe it? Well, that's journaling for me. And I know a lot of you may also underestimate this very powerful tool, but let me give you a few hints as to how to use them. Firstly, I want you to understand that journaling is a process of dumping. Now, I know that doesn't sound really good. Why would you want to dump stuff? Well, the truth of the matter is, if the journal is something that you have not had an opportunity to use, then I'd like you to spend more time having this interface, having this ability to transit from your brain into your book so that you have a proper connection to allow outflow of data from your brain to your book. Now, not everybody is able to do this, and not everyone is willing to do this because they don't like spending time with themselves. Unfortunately, I think it's a necessary part of life. This is especially useful for the introverted part of yourself. When I say introverted part, what I mean is that all of us are both introverted and extroverted at the same time. We all, however, need to respect different portions of us that bring a certain capability to the table. So introversion, for example, is very useful when you're paying attention, when you're doing self-reflection, when you're meditating. Extroversion is great for sharing ideas, talking about things, and networking, right? So you don't want to just dismiss one part of you. You want to be able to utilize it and embrace it. So here's what I like to recommend for all of you. When you do journaling, there are a variety of ways to use it. I've identified at least 7. The first one has got to do with dumping of emotions. So when you sit down and you dump all of your emotions that are raw, confusion, fear, anxiety, anger, whatever it might be, just let it go into that journal. How you want to deal with that later on is another issue. But when you are so clogged up inside your mind, isn't it nice to be able to release everything? This is a form of catharsis that's not really rehearsal. It's actually useful for you so that you can process it and let it go. So as you're writing, you'll be thinking about your writing already. But the first cut is likely to be very raw, so I'd like you to think of it as draft 1. So once you're done with dumping, you want to be able to spend a concerted effort 1 day later or perhaps 2 days later. Don't wait too long, especially if it's a very strong feeling, to go into it and process that emotion. Now, by rereading it to yourself, you will start to get feelings or reactions based on what you've written. And once you've done that, you have another impetus to write something else based on what you have felt. All right? So the first one is raw. The second one is based on a reflection of that raw feeling. What that does is it puts into context the way you are feeling. And this most certainly drives new insight about yourself and creates new perspectives for what you can do and what you cannot do. That's the first method of journaling. The second method of journaling is to journal what happened during the day. This is obvious because you need milestone points in your day to be able to identify what happened and to recollect what are some of the things that you have achieved and what made you feel really good. Now, here's something that's very important. Many people end up doing the first one as a step-by-step writing down all the bad feelings that they've had in the day. Well, if you do that, then keep track of this on a week-to-week basis. If that week was very, very negative, then what you need to do is to reverse that. Instead of focusing on only the negative, put in some deliberate effort to hunt for positive experiences and amplify them, to make them seen, to make them known. Literally, use this as a balance up between your tendency to be morose, negative, and depressed, and towards being positive, grateful, and joyful, right? So you can see this when you're doing a day-to-day dump. What did you achieve? What did you fail at? What were the things that you succeeded at? What were the nice people that you met? Versus who was a pain in the butt? Who was someone who was really unreasonable? Who was unfair to you? And so on and so forth. So when your mind starts focusing on only one aspect, which is not so positive, allow your body, your mind to also create a counterbalance using this method of journaling. That's the second method. The third method is what we call process journaling. Process journaling is simply sitting down and thinking about the future. And when you think about the future, you are creating a vision for that future. And as you journal that vision as clearly as possible, you're going to return back to that and continue to add on to the clarity of that vision. Now, this is not really the third type of journaling. This is probably the fourth type, which is getting clear on your vision. But you need this in order to create a process. That is, on a day-to-day basis, if you have not gotten clear about who you are, what you want to accomplish in life, write it down, because this is going to have a flux. It's going to change from moment to moment, especially as you grow in wisdom and you encounter difficulties in your life. Write down that vision so clearly that the moment you see it, it feels right to you. Okay, so this is vision journaling. The process journaling part is how do you close the gap from where you are to where you need to go. So process journaling is ideas to get you to move forward. Oh, I want to make $1 million in business. Okay, one idea is I offer free products to my first 100 clients. And if they like it, they're likely to buy something else. Or you want to start a community and you decide that this is something that you want to do in order to help the helpless, for example, and whatever it might be, right? So now you have inside your mind, okay, how am I going to get that? So perhaps I need to advertise. Maybe I need to spread word of mouth. Maybe I need to incentivize. Maybe I need to craft more content on YouTube, and so on and so forth. So as time goes by, you begin to realize how important keeping track of the processes are, because this will determine whether you're executing your processes or not executing your processes. Those that you've executed, you can get feedback and refine them. Those that you've not executed, why not? Because that's another point of reflection. This also highlights that you got ideas about the process, but you're not really implementing them, which gives you a new insight anyway. So those are the third and fourth type of journaling practices, the process-oriented journaling practice, and the fourth one, which I kind of like did in reverse order, which is vision, right? You need to get clear on your vision. Next, what you want to do is to take a look at what we call weaknesses. I know this is not something that you like to do. In fact, this is something that I absolutely dislike. One of the challenges, however, is most of the time we do not confront our stumbling blocks in life. These are the things that cause patterns of cycles going along in your life. So for example, in my case, one of the biggest challenges in the way I view life was that I tended to think that whatever idea that I had was ultimately very good. And I ended up arguing with people a lot. And this was one of my themes in life. And this was in my 20s. And I started to ask myself, why do I do that? Isn't there a better way? Why do I need to get so frustrated by other people? So this actually gave me an insight into part of the weaknesses of my preferences. So I started to confront them. I wrote down literally why I thought those were weaknesses and how other people would view them. So I'll step into multiple people's shoes and start writing their views of my weakness. And rather than me attempting to justify the weakness, I actually confront it. Okay, he views it this way, which is really negative. She views it this way. And when I take a look at it, I'll go, yeah, this weakness is real and it's a real big stumbling block. How do I deal with this? Then I go into process journaling. How do I close the gaps? How do I have an innovative way of moving myself forward in life? So it's important for us to confront those weaknesses, because sometimes by exploring the beliefs surrounding those weaknesses, we would have solidified part of our character. We wouldn't have to constantly look behind our shoulder every time, wondering whether we made the same mistake. So that's the fifth one, which is weakness-based journaling. I know that sucks, right? So obviously we're going to balance it up with something else, which is known as strengths-based journaling. Strengths-based journaling is critical because I think from a moment-to-moment basis, we need some level of self-efficacy. We need to believe in ourselves. We need to have confidence in ourselves. Without that, it's going to be real challenging, especially when you meet a big event in your life that's a disaster or something that's traumatic, and you need to find some footing. You need to dive into what David Goggins calls the cookie jar, right? And to pull out something in your life that's powerful. So I remember moments when I was down, and it's easy for bad feelings to trigger off all the bad feelings in my life because they're all related by the same emotion: depression, sadness, and doubt, right? So whenever I fail in something, I think of the times when I failed as a teenager in school, right? They just keep coming back out. Now, in order for me to be able to change that, I need to have on-call resources. So what are some of my strengths? What are some of my capabilities or my superpowers? Well, I tend to have a huge amount of compassion for people. I also tend to be able to piece things together quite quickly. I'm a rapid learner. I put out a lot of content quite rapidly, far faster than some other people may even think of, right? So what I tend to do is therefore utilize that, and I immerse in that, and I amplify that emotion. This is one of the videos that I've done. I'll put it in the link below so that you can watch that as well, because resource-based emotional states are very, very powerful. Now, as I journal my strengths, I'm not going to have that on my whim and call at the back of my hand. I want to be able to have that. So having this journal is useful. Every time I'm feeling down or every time I need that boost, I'll pull that out, take a look at it, and yes, it feels like it's external, but in reality, it is internal. It's a reminder of what you are, how you have been able to survive difficulties through your life, right? Especially challenges that you've overcome. Own that, claim that, and live that. Okay? So this is the sixth method, which is strengths-based journaling. The last one I would recommend would be based on the life vision chart that I talk about so frequently. I recommend that you sit down and have a chapter for each of the 11 different areas of your life. We talked about vision already. You can have one separately on vision, but I'd like you to just make a list of all of these things pertaining to your physical, your emotional, psychological, character, your social life, your career, as well as your spirituality. Now, each and every one of these will have a very specific segment, and you can utilize a timeline approach, which I've mentioned in the initial parts of this journaling process. You can put down your emotions related to that. I know a guy whose interest in spirituality is so overwhelming. Sometimes he has emotional epiphanies, right? So you can write about that from an emotional standpoint, but have a chapter in that journal. So you can imagine that you're going to need a heck of a lot of different exercise books, right? Just to note this down is not going to be a really cheap thing. And I write them down, using ink and pen. But sometimes I find that I don't have access to this, so I'll use a digital means and then I'll transfer it. Easier said than done, but again, it's important for you to compartmentalize it and to put it in a place where it's reserved for all of your reflections. So, did you learn anything from that video? If you did, just give it a thumbs up and then click on the subscribe button and hit the notifications icon so that you and I will continue to stay in touch and I can provide you with updates whenever we have new videos.